Welcome back. You're watching the News Grid Roundtable. Today our focus is on the economy, and we're asking you the question, does government have the right plan to bring the South African economy out of the COVID-19 economic rut, and are they moving fast enough? I have with me economists, Miriam Altman as well as Duma Kobule. They're both joining me by Skype. So Miriam, before we went on the break, Duma was speaking about processes at NEDLAC. In mid-August, the president had issued a statement after a NEDLAC meeting where he said there would be a team assembled that would then ultimately be tasked with the presentation of a plan within a matter of weeks to help the country forge a way forward. As we sit here today, there's still no plan.
Well, I want to come back to what he said, which was, and your question, can you separate these things? In Korea, maybe you can separate it, but in South Africa, you cannot separate it. Because as Duma correctly says, we were in a process where, the economy was already shrinking. Employment was actually falling. It wasn't just growing slowly. So, the COVID problem adds to it. Even in terms of the health response, we've got to be thinking about a very different context to South Korea, because that was an example he gave, where we have many other diseases that have to be managed, like TB, in a similar way. So, in a more balanced way. Now, the thing is that I want to come back to something that you said, and I'm going to speak truth to power now, which is, you said there's a NEDLAC plan, they're trying to come up with a NEDLAC plan, there's a COSATU plan around energy, there's a this plan and a that plan around how we're going to create energy. Well, the reality is, one of the problems that we have right now that we need to turn around is how we do these things. In energy, you have a department that's supposed to be setting policy, and yes, it's supposed to be engaging with NEDLAC, but NEDLAC is not a policy-making body. Then you have a CEO, and you have a board, and they are, insofar as something is supposed to be delivered by ESCOM. And the department should be indicating how it goes about that, and there's a regulator. And things are supposed to be done, that they should be held accountable to deliver the amount of energy that is required in the economy. And we don't need 20 plans. What we need is effective leadership in these key institutions and an effective process of accountability. And so that leads to, stabilizing the fiscal pathway that we have and sticking to a budget process and not making big announcements in the middle of the year.
Do we have that leadership though, Miriam?
Well, that's what we should be focusing on, is the point. Now, what we've been doing in the National Planning Commission, and I'm not here as a commissioner today, I'm speaking independently, but I am part of leading a process in the National Planning Commission, which is of an economic review. And we have been putting out a number, I've been on your show for that. We've been putting out various reports and are going to be having many more engagements in the near future around concrete recommendations to do exactly what I'm saying. The key issue right now in South Africa, I wish the key issues were big economic policy. It's much more interesting for me. But the big issues right now in South Africa have to do with the undermining of state capacity and the need to restore and build that capacity, the leadership, capable leadership in the SOEs, the boards, following the right processes and holding some level of accountability. And what we do is, we're so fragmented in the way we're doing things. Now, that stuff seems abstract to a lot of people because you'd rather talk about what. And what we're saying is we've got to talk about how. If you don't have those people in place who are enabled and accountable and capable, nothing is going to move. And we're just not having enough conversation and discussion about those things. I mean, that's actually what should be discussed in NEDLAC. And what NEDLAC should be holding them to account. We don't need another list, quite frankly, that will say we need to have an auction for spectrum and we need to procure energy and we need to do X, Y, Z. We have that list. The problem is, why doesn't stuff move? We've had construction budgets that don't get spent. So why is that? And that's the question we've been asking in the National Planning Commission. And
let me take that question.
Put that out.
Forgive me, let me take that question and put it to Duma. Duma, so why are the plans not being actioned?
Thembekile, let's start with the ANC, the ruling party. There's an inexplicable paralysis to decide on even the smallest issues. I'll give you an example. In the latest ANC document, they talk about reviewing Regulation 28 to enable institutional funds to invest in infrastructure. But that has been going on since the RDP of 1993. They've been discussing this for 27 years, and they haven't made a decision on this. So I don't understand, it's way above my pay grade, as to why there is this paralysis to even discuss or agree on the smallest issues like Miriam is talking about. We can't solve those things. So I actually don't have a solution. I don't know what to do, but we need to innovate, perhaps bypass government for a while and create new, I don't know, like create new institutions that bypass government temporarily. I understand in the US they did it after the New Deal. They set up new agencies to spend the money, but I don't know what we have to do in South Africa.
What you're both pointing to is, in essence, a waste of time, right? But when you read the president's statement on the GDP numbers out yesterday, he speaks of making further announcements in due course. He also then goes on to call on all sectors of society to act with unity and purpose to rebuild the economy for the benefit of all South Africans. But Miriam, how do you continue not only to get the buy-in of the other sectors, but to keep them encouraged when there are these constant delays that are affecting business and ordinary South Africans who suffer at the end of the day because there is no money?
Well, it's not an issue that there's no money. There is money, and I don't know that the main conversation should be about whether we can take money out of the pensions. I don't think availability of money is our core problem. I think our core problem right now is confidence. So when we're trying to raise money, the issue is not that we have high debt, it's that we have runaway debt. That we just don't have a grip on that process. If we could show, even if it were said things are going to get worse before they get better, but here's the pathway back, creditors would understand that. So the critical thing is committing to a path and having much more discussion about the issues that we're raising. And the reason that we've been putting so much effort in the National Planning Commission to these things is that when you say we need to build leadership or strengthen systems of accountability, it sounds a little bit abstract as compared to saying we need to procure energy. And maybe people feel disempowered by that. But the reality is that's what we should be talking about. And I hope that people will be looking at those papers. They are available online. And I can give the address. It's nationalplanningcommission.org.za/publications_reports. But anyway, you can find it online. And everything from infrastructure, SOEs, education, digital readiness, we've put a lot of effort into thinking about what would be required to rebuild this capacity and to deal with the how. Why is it that we all agree we want to do X, like spend on infrastructure, but only a fraction of the spending happens? What goes wrong? Exactly that question that Doom is asking. There's some kind of paralysis or stasis, and it's not for lack of will on so many things. So what happens? Mm-hmm. And that's the question we're asking. That's what we should all be talking about.
Forgive me, Miriam. On leadership, Duma, the president, yes, has issued a statement. You've got the finance minister who's taken to Twitter saying, well, no media interviews. I will reply or respond to all in an op-ed due out on the weekend. Is that really acceptable from the finance minister, given the urgency of the moment?
It's completely unacceptable. And the finance minister took time off to talk to the Zambian media about his recent, the problem he had in terms of what he was saying in Zambia. So for him to be talking to Zambian media and not talking to South African media is unacceptable.
Miriam, where is the finance minister during such a crucial time? Surely the country cannot wait for Sunday.
You mean in relation to making a statement?
In terms of the conversations that are being had about the state of the economy. So you've got South African business, South African citizens, the president also all alarmed at this latest data as far as GDP, right? A lot of people are saying they're still waiting to hear a coherent presentation by the finance minister. I'm wondering if you have heard that from Tito Mboweni, where you would say, indeed, the finance minister is taking the charge and leading us forward.
There is definitely a process in government to be looking at a recovery plan. And the Treasury is certainly on it, and each of the key economic departments is definitely on it. I don't know that the finance minister has to comment immediately about this. Maybe the president does. One of the issues that I would raise actually is that coherence in government's communication would go a long way in the way we had it, many years ago, and I don't know why our finance minister necessarily has to immediately respond. What he needs to do is respond when he has a coherent statement to make from Treasury, by the way, because he doesn't speak on behalf of all of government. It's for the president to announce these things, or for ministers to report on what they're doing. Now, as you know, they did produce a supplementary budget, and that is an appropriate communication from the Minister of Finance, and that's what they did. And the next major statement, as you know, would be the medium-term budget statement. And anything in between, on Twitter or otherwise, I don't think he has to communicate with us every day, because there's suddenly a South Africa report that's come out.
Duma, the finance minister does not have to communicate every day. The president has spoken. So what's your issue?
I don't agree. Let me explain. That the president hasn't been communicating. In about 2 hours' time, in an hour and 15 minutes, he's going to have his first session with the media public, where he does question and answers. The same, we haven't had communication from Treasury. What has been happening when Thembekile is that the president announces and Treasury cancels. I can go through a long list of things that have happened over the past few months. In September 2018, the president announced the infrastructure fund of 400 billion. 18 months later, the Treasury has cancelled it. There is not a single cent allocation for the next year towards the infrastructure fund. The president announced a 1.6 billion plan for gender-based violence. Almost a year later, we haven't seen the money where it's coming from. The president announced the 500 billion rand stimulus, and Treasury cancelled the stimulus. So I think Treasury has, and all that Treasury does is to give us a plan that they developed before the crisis. So that is completely unacceptable, because this is a crisis like no other crisis.
Okay.
And you can't be reproducing a plan from so long ago.
Duma Kubule, Miriam Altman, thank you both for that conversation.